When the Galactic Council gathered in their grand hall, most humans believed the meeting would decide small political matters. No one expected the decision that would change their future forever. The council members sat in a circle of shining platforms, each drifting slowly in the air. Their voices echoed across the chamber, cold and heavy, carrying a tone that left no room for hope. They accused humanity of acting without permission in frontier regions, of building small outposts without filing endless council forms, and of trying to protect weaker worlds on their own instead of waiting for council approval. At the center of the room stood a human officer known for speaking honestly and defending his people. He was calm, even though thousands of eyes watched him. He explained that humans helped those frontier colonies because no one else arrived in time. But the council members dismissed his words. They said he disturbed their order, shook their politics, and made them look weak in front of the galaxy. A final vote was taken. One by one, the council lights turned red. The decision was clear. Humanity was to be banished. Every human ship operating near council borders had to leave immediately. Every human representative was dismissed. Every human settlement inside council space had to shut down. The officer who had spoken strongly for humanity was ordered to take his people far away, beyond mapped space, and never return. A deep silence filled the chamber. For a moment, he felt the weight of disappointment pressing on his shoulders. He knew what this meant for millions of families. It meant abandoning homes, businesses, dreams, and years of work. But he did not show anger. Instead, he stood straight, thanked the council for giving at least a chance to speak, and walked out with quiet dignity. When the news spread across human colonies, shock turned quickly into sadness. People felt confused. They asked why helping others was considered a crime. They wondered whether the council feared human growth or simply did not want change. The officer gathered his team of scientists, engineers, and families. He explained the truth in simple words. They had two choices. They could stay near council space and live under rules that treated them as troublemakers, or they could leave together and build something new on their own terms. The decision did not come from force. It came from unity. Slowly, humans volunteered to leave. They packed supplies, gathered tools, saved seeds, stored knowledge, and prepared their ships for a long journey into unknown space. Many were scared. Some cried while leaving their homes behind. But they also carried something stronger than fear. They carried hope that somewhere out there, far from council politics, they could build a life that respected their work and dreams. The officer led a fleet of ships out of council-controlled stars. There were transport vessels full of families, cargo carriers filled with machines, medical ships, exploration craft, and a few old defense ships that barely counted as protection. They flew together, like a long silver ribbon stretching through the darkness. As they crossed the boundary marker of council territory, a message appeared on their screens. It was short and sharp, giving them final coordinates and warnings not to return. Once the fleet passed the last signal buoy, a strange calmness filled the air. Behind them was the structured world of the council. Ahead was the silent, uncharted galaxy. No maps, no stations, no patrols. Only endless darkness with tiny sparks of distant stars. The officer knew this was where their real test would begin. The journey was long and exhausting. Their ships traveled for weeks through empty regions where no signals existed. Families stayed busy to keep spirits high. Children drew pictures of new worlds they hoped to see. Engineers checked ship engines day and night. Farmers grew small sections of crops in controlled chambers to keep fresh food available. Doctors monitored everyone's health. People supported each other, shared stories, and reminded themselves that this journey was not a punishment, but a chance to rebuild a better future. One night, as the ships drifted through a quiet star field, The officer looked through the main window. The stars ahead seemed brighter, as if guiding them. He called his team to the main deck. They studied long-range scans and found something surprising: a cluster of planets orbiting a yellow star far from any known route. The system was unmarked on council charts. It was untouched, unexplored, and perfectly positioned for survival if they could adapt. The fleet changed direction and headed toward the system. Excitement spread quickly. People gathered near windows to watch the approaching planets. The first world they passed was covered in storms too wild for settlement. The second was a frozen ball of ice. But the third world caught everyone's attention. It had oceans, mountains, and large flat plains that could be transformed with time and effort. The officer ordered landing teams to survey the surface. Shuttles descended slowly, passing through thick clouds. On the ground, the teams walked across hard soil. The air was thin but breathable, with a little help from portable filters. Strange plants moved gently with the wind. Small animal-like creatures peeked from behind rocks. The world was rough, but it was full of potential. The team sent messages back to the fleet. They reported that with some work, they could grow crops, build shelters, and create a safe environment. The officer listened quietly. He felt a mix of relief and determination. This was not home yet, but it could become one. The fleet landed in stages. People stepped onto the new world with cautious curiosity. Some touched the ground with their hands, sensing the promise it held. Others looked around, imagining where they would build their homes. No one complained about the challenges. They had already survived far worse. The first few days were spent setting up basic camps. Engineers built temporary shelters. Farmers prepared soil samples for testing. Scientists set up small labs to study the environment. Workers placed large metal plates on the ground to create stable landing zones for heavier ships. The officer walked among the people every day. He talked to them, asked about their needs, and encouraged them. He made sure they never felt abandoned or alone. He reminded them that this was not exile, it was a beginning. They had been pushed out by the council, but they were not defeated. They were still strong, still united, and still capable of building something greater than anyone expected. Nights on the new world were cold, but the sky was beautiful. The stars shined brighter than they had ever seen before, stretching across the horizon like a silver river. People sat together near heaters, sharing warm drinks and telling stories of life back home. But for the first time, those stories did not feel like memories of loss. They felt like lessons guiding them toward a new future. By the end of the first week, humans had already built solar fields, water filters, and growing chambers. Small green sprouts began pushing through prepared soil. Children ran across cleared paths, laughing as they explored. Workers climbed hills to place early communication towers so the entire fleet could stay connected. The officer watched all this with quiet pride. He had feared that exile would break them. Instead, it had brought them closer. Their struggle was shaping them into something stronger than they ever were. Under the council's control, he knew challenges lay ahead: storms, shortages, unknown creatures, and the burden of building a society from nothing. But he also knew the truth. When humans were pushed into a corner, they did not fold. They adapted. They worked. They united. The council had banished them, hoping they would fade into darkness. But as the officer looked out at the busy settlement, the shining machinery, and the determined faces of his people, he understood something powerful. This was not the end. This was the foundation of something greater. A future shaped not by fear, but by human courage, hard work, and the belief that even in the farthest corner of the galaxy, they could rise again. Life on the new world was not easy, but humans were determined. Every morning, people woke up early to begin their work. The soil had to be prepared, water systems had to be maintained, and shelters needed constant repair. Every day brought challenges that tested patience and skill. Storms would sometimes rage unexpectedly, with winds strong enough to shake the temporary buildings. But humans did not give up. They learned quickly to secure the structures, cover the crops, and protect their families. One of the first lessons the humans learned was how unforgiving this world could be. Some seeds failed to grow because the soil had too many unknown minerals. Some small machines broke due to dust storms that no one had predicted. At first, this discouraged some people. They were tired, homesick, and worried about their future. Yet the officer reminded them to look at each failure as a step forward. "Every mistake we fix now," he said, "makes us stronger for the days ahead." Slowly, people began to see the truth in his words. They adjusted, repaired, and tried again. Children, who had been worried about leaving their homes, slowly started exploring. They ran over hills, climbed small rocks, and discovered tiny creatures that darted between the plants. Some of the creatures were shy, hiding quickly when humans approached. Others were bold, coming closer to examine the newcomers. Scientists recorded everything, careful not to disturb the balance of this new world. Even the smallest observation became important. Humans had to understand this planet if they were to survive. At night, the sky seemed endless. The stars looked closer than ever, and the two moons of the planet reflected light across the plains. Families gathered around small fires and shared stories about their old homes. They laughed about childhood games and moments of curiosity, but there were also moments of sadness. Many had left behind friends, schools, and workplaces. Yet, as they shared these memories, something remarkable happened. They realized that they had not truly lost everything. They still had each other. They still had hope. They still had a future to build. The officer spent long hours walking among the people, listening to their concerns and helping solve problems. He did not consider himself above anyone. If a water filter broke, he worked beside the engineers. If a shelter needed extra support, he carried beams with the workers. Children loved seeing him help, and adults respected his willingness to act rather than just give orders. His leadership was not about authority, it was about action, guidance, and care. As weeks passed, the humans began to improve the environment around them. They discovered underground water pockets and built channels to bring fresh water to their growing fields. Scientists experimented with soil mixtures to increase fertility. Engineers designed better machines to help with planting, watering, and construction. Slowly, the harshness of the planet became manageable. Humans were not only surviving, they were learning to thrive. Trade and resource management became another challenge. They had only brought what they could carry from their previous homes. Every tool, every seed, every piece of equipment had to be used wisely. People shared resources fairly. Arguments happened sometimes, but the officer encouraged open communication. They held meetings every week to discuss problems, plan tasks, and decide together how to divide work and resources. This teamwork strengthened the community, teaching them that survival depended not on one person, but on everyone working together. One day, a young scientist discovered a plant that could grow quickly and provide food for many people. It was a breakthrough. The officer gathered everyone to celebrate the small victory. They planted more seeds, and within a few weeks, the first green fields spread across the dry soil. Children helped water the plants, and families shared in the excitement of seeing the first fruits of their labor. That moment became a symbol of hope for everyone. While the humans adapted to life on the surface, the officer also considered long-term safety. Scouts were sent to explore nearby hills, rivers, and caves. They reported unusual terrain, occasional small creatures, and strange plants. No immediate danger appeared, but humans learned to be cautious. Every new discovery required careful observation. It became clear that understanding this world completely would take years, perhaps decades. But the humans were patient and willing. Social life slowly developed among the settlers. People formed small groups to cook, clean, and share responsibilities. They celebrated small victories together, like the first harvest or the successful repair of a damaged machine. Evenings became a time for music, storytelling, and quiet reflection. Some adults taught children about science, farming, or engineering, passing knowledge that would help the next generation. Others shared old human traditions, reminding everyone of the culture they carried from their old home. One important lesson humans learned was resilience. Storms sometimes destroyed partially built homes. Crops occasionally failed. Machines broke despite careful use. Yet every time something went wrong, humans adapted. They rebuilt faster, planned more carefully, and learned from their mistakes. They began to understand that survival was not about luck. It was about effort, teamwork, and determination. Every day was a test, and every small success became a reason to keep moving forward. Humans also learned to protect themselves. The planet was mostly safe, but there were areas with rocky terrain or deep water where accidents could happen. Safety rules were established, and adults taught children how to navigate carefully. The officer emphasized caution without fear. They had to respect the planet, not conquer it. This careful approach helped prevent injuries and made life more organized. As months passed, humans began to imagine the future. They drew simple maps of the planet, marking water sources, fertile lands, and safe zones. Engineers designed permanent homes instead of temporary shelters. Scientists studied the atmosphere and soil in detail, experimenting with ways to improve agriculture. Children were encouraged to explore safely, learning about plants, animals, and the stars above. The planet began to feel less like exile and more like a new home. The officer often reflected on the journey. Being banished had seemed like the end at first. But now, he realized it had become an opportunity. Humans had been pushed out of familiar space, but this challenge had brought out their best qualities: courage, cooperation, curiosity, and determination. They were not just surviving, they were building a life based on their values, not the orders of others. One evening, as the two moons rose together in the sky, the officer walked along a small hill overlooking the settlement. He saw families tending gardens, children running along cleared paths, and engineers working on new structures. The wind carried a fresh scent from the fields. For the first time, he felt a deep sense of pride. Humans had faced the unknown, and instead of being defeated, they had begun to thrive. Word of the human settlement slowly spread beyond their fleet. Small signals were sent to nearby unclaimed regions, carefully encrypted to avoid alerting the council. Other explorers, traders, and travelers noticed unusual signs: small green patches on an otherwise barren world, flashes of light from energy systems, and communication signals that hinted at organization. Though humans had intended to remain hidden, their determination made them visible. The galaxy was slowly becoming aware that humanity had not disappeared. Even with progress, the officer reminded everyone to remain humble. They had achieved a lot, but much remained to be done. They had to continue learning, experimenting, and improving. They had to plan for long-term survival, future generations, and possible encounters with other civilizations. Exile had been the beginning, but building a lasting home required vision, effort, and unity. By the end of the first year, the human settlement was no longer just a temporary camp. It had grown into a functioning community with green fields, shelters, laboratories, workshops, and a sense of order. Humans had adapted to the planet's environment, respected its challenges, and built a life together. Children no longer asked about the council or old homes. They asked about the future, about building new inventions, about wonders the planet might hide. The officer looked at his people one evening and smiled quietly. They had come far, but he knew their journey was just beginning. The challenges of survival were behind them, but the challenges of growth, knowledge, and expansion lay ahead. Humanity had been banished, but now they had a home of their own making. A home where courage, determination, and unity would shape the future. Humans had discovered a truth that no council decision could ever take away. When people work together with hope and determination, even the harshest exile can become the foundation of something remarkable. Life on the new planet had started to settle into a rhythm, but humans never stopped exploring. Every day brought curiosity, learning, and the hope of discovering more about their surroundings. Scientists and explorers were especially eager to venture farther from the main settlement. They wanted to understand the hills, forests, and strange rock formations that stretched beyond the fields. One day, a small team was sent to investigate a series of rocky ridges that seemed unusual on long-range scans. As they climbed over the jagged rocks, they noticed strange structures half buried in dirt and moss. At first, they thought they were natural formations, but closer inspection revealed patterns, shapes, and symbols carved into the surfaces. The team realized they had stumbled upon ruins, the remains of an ancient civilization, long gone, but whose technology might still exist somewhere nearby. Excitement and caution filled the explorers at the same time. They returned to the settlement and reported their discovery. The officer immediately organized a larger expedition, this time with engineers, scientists, and security teams. They wanted to examine the ruins carefully, document everything, and make sure nothing dangerous could harm the settlement. People were eager to help. Some packed supplies, others built temporary shelters closer to the site, and some volunteered to monitor communications for safety. The ruins stretched across a wide area, with some structures partially collapsed. But one building seemed intact, unlike the others. Its walls were smooth and metallic, with panels that reflected light like glass. Symbols glowed faintly when touched, and panels slid open with gentle pressure. Inside, the team discovered what could only be described as machines far more advanced than anything humans had built themselves. Some appeared to be energy sources, others seemed like communication devices, and a few looked like vehicles or ships. The officer encouraged the team to approach slowly and carefully. They had no idea if these machines were safe. The team started documenting everything. Scientists studied the materials, engineers examined the mechanisms, and technicians tested systems that could be powered without risk. It became clear that these devices had been built to last centuries, and despite being abandoned, many were still functional. Humans were amazed. They had never seen technology like this before. Days turned into weeks as humans experimented with the equipment. At first, progress was slow. Some machines would not respond. Others required complex sequences of activation. But humans were patient, curious, and willing to learn. Small successes began to appear. One machine provided clean water in large quantities. Another allowed energy to be collected from sunlight more efficiently than anything humans had built themselves. A small vehicle was repaired to move across the rocky terrain faster than walking. The officer realized that this technology could change everything for their people. It would make farming easier, construction faster, and communication across the planet simpler. Humans had survived exile with hard work, but now they had tools that could accelerate their growth. Even more exciting was the possibility that the technology could be adapted to explore beyond their planet. They could build faster ships, study nearby systems, and eventually reach new worlds. Humans worked tirelessly. Engineers designed ways to integrate alien energy sources with human systems. Scientists studied symbols to understand their functions, while technicians figured out how to maintain them safely. Children watched from a distance, learning by observation, while families continued daily tasks. Life had become a balance between survival and discovery, with the thrill of learning something new every day. As they explored more ruins, humans found storage chambers filled with preserved data. Holographic screens flickered to life when activated, showing maps of star systems, diagrams of machines, and recordings of alien life. Some of it was confusing, but humans slowly began to understand the principles behind the technology. They realized that the civilization had been highly advanced, but still faced challenges similar to their own. Humans felt a sense of connection, as if the long-gone builders had left clues for anyone brave enough to explore. The officer encouraged his people to share discoveries openly. Every breakthrough, every repair, and every lesson learned was communicated to the settlement. This transparency built trust and cooperation. People felt part of a larger mission. They were not just surviving, they were learning, improving, and preparing for a future that could extend far beyond this planet. One particularly exciting discovery was a small, functional ship buried in the ruins. It was unlike any human design, sleek and smooth, with energy systems that needed minimal fuel. Engineers worked for days to understand the controls, cautiously testing it in short flights around the settlement. Children watched in awe as the ship hovered and moved with precision. Humans realized that if they could master this technology, they could explore beyond their planet faster than ever imagined, beyond practical tools. The ruins also taught humans lessons about endurance, innovation, and culture. Symbols and recordings revealed how the alien civilization had organized itself, solved problems, and faced challenges. Humans saw parallels to their own situation. They were reminded that intelligence, courage, and curiosity could survive even the harshest environments. These lessons strengthened their resolve. Not everything was easy. Some machines malfunctioned, creating small accidents. Some areas of the ruins were unstable and had to be reinforced before humans could work safely. Storms occasionally damaged partially repaired equipment. Yet humans adapted. They learned to anticipate problems, work in teams, and protect both themselves and the technology they had discovered. Every challenge became a chance to grow stronger. The officer often spoke to the people about responsibility. This technology is a gift, he said, but also a test. We must use it wisely. We must continue to respect each other, the planet, and the knowledge left behind. Our actions now will determine whether humanity thrives or fails in the future. People listened, understanding that discovery without care could be dangerous. They were growing not only in skill, but in wisdom. Over months, humans managed to integrate several devices into daily life. Energy machines powered the growing fields. Water purifiers supplied fresh water efficiently, and communication devices allowed messages to travel across the settlement instantly. Even the small vehicle helped farmers carry heavy loads over rough terrain. Life became easier, but it was still full of work and learning. Humans had learned that comfort came from effort, planning, and cooperation. The officer also realized the potential for growth beyond their planet. Maps found in the ruins hinted at nearby star systems, some with planets that could support life. Humans could explore these worlds, gather resources, and expand their settlements. The idea of a small empire forming in uncharted space began to take shape, not built on force, but on knowledge, cooperation, and exploration. Humans continued to train and educate each other. Children learned science, engineering, and farming. Adults taught problem-solving, teamwork, and leadership. Even entertainment became educational. Stories of their first journey into exile were retold, not as tales of sadness, but as lessons of courage, resilience, and hope. Everyone understood that the future depended on continuous effort, learning, and unity. One evening, the officer stood on a ridge overlooking the settlement and the ruins. Lights flickered across the buildings, energy machines hummed, and children played among the fields. He thought about how far they had come. They had been banished, cast out into the unknown, yet here they were stronger, wiser, and full of potential. The discovery of ancient technology had given them more than tools. It had given them vision, knowledge, and a sense of purpose that no exile could take away. The humans understood something profound. Survival was not enough. To truly thrive, they needed to grow, learn, and prepare for challenges beyond their world. The ruins were a reminder that intelligence and courage could endure across generations, and that humanity, even in exile, could build something extraordinary if they worked together. As the moons rose over the horizon, casting silver light across the fields, the officer felt a quiet hope. The settlement was no longer just a home. It was the beginning of something greater, a human civilization shaped not by fear, not by orders from a distant council, but by determination, knowledge, and the ability to adapt. Humans had found tools, knowledge, and lessons from a civilization long gone, but they had also found something more important: belief in themselves. Exile had forced them into a challenge, but it had also unlocked their potential. From this point onward, nothing in the galaxy would underestimate what humanity could achieve when it worked together, explored fearlessly, and never gave up. Even as they rested, humans dreamed. They dreamed of exploring new planets, building new settlements, and connecting with other civilizations. They dreamed of using the knowledge they had uncovered to improve life for everyone, not just themselves. And most importantly, they dreamed of a future where humanity was no longer seen as weak or disposable, but as a force of ingenuity, courage, and hope. The officer looked up at the stars, imagining the vastness of space beyond the planet. The ruins had taught humans that knowledge was power, but wisdom and unity were even stronger. With these lessons, humanity was. Months had passed since humans discovered the ancient technology. Life on the planet was growing more organized, but the officer reminded everyone that the galaxy was not empty. Being exiled did not mean they were free from danger. Unknown civilizations might exist nearby, and some could see humans as easy targets. The humans had learned to thrive on this new planet, but they still had to protect themselves. One morning, long-range sensors detected movement beyond the system. Small blips appeared at first, barely visible against the stars. Technicians examined the signals carefully and realized they were not natural phenomena. Something was approaching a fleet of ships, larger than any humans had encountered before. Scouts identified them as a hostile alien faction known for raiding unclaimed territories. They were not explorers or traders. They were conquerors looking for resources to take by force. The officer immediately called a council of leaders. Engineers, strategists, and pilots gathered in the main hall to plan. Everyone knew that humans were still small in number and limited in firepower compared to a true military fleet. But they also had advantages: intelligence, quick thinking, and knowledge of their own planet. They had learned to adapt to difficult situations. Their goal was clear: they had to defend the settlement, protect families, and buy time until they could find a safer solution. The first step was preparation. Farmers helped build defensive barriers around key areas. Engineers reinforced structures, and pilots prepared ships with the limited weaponry they had. Scientists worked to integrate alien technology into their defenses. Some energy devices were adapted to shield buildings, while other machines were connected to sensors to detect approaching ships faster. Humans moved with purpose, knowing that their survival depended on teamwork and careful planning. When the alien ships arrived, they moved quickly, expecting an easy target. They did not anticipate the humans' preparation. Sensors alerted the fleet early, and defense systems activated automatically. The alien ships fired, but the shields held. Humans had designed energy barriers strong enough to withstand initial attacks, buying them time. The officer coordinated teams carefully, giving clear instructions and making sure every human knew their role. The first confrontation was tense. Humans had fewer ships, smaller weapons, and less experience in combat. But they were smart. They used the terrain of their planet to their advantage. Energy traps hidden in the valleys caused enemy ships to slow down. Automated systems misled the attackers about the locations of humans' defensive positions. Even small maneuvers forced the aliens to adjust constantly, preventing them from overwhelming the settlement. Inside the settlement, humans worked with incredible focus. Families contributed in every way they could. Engineers repaired small damages immediately. Scientists monitored enemy communications, trying to anticipate their moves. Children helped by delivering messages between teams. No one was idle. Every contribution mattered, and humans felt a growing sense of unity. They were fighting not only to survive, but to prove that they could face any challenge. The officer himself took command of a small group of ships. They were not the largest or most powerful, but they were fast, clever, and coordinated. Using information from scouts and sensors, they struck at weak points in the alien fleet. They targeted supply ships and communication nodes, slowing the enemy and forcing them to rethink their attack. The alien commanders, confident in their numbers, were surprised by the human strategy and adaptability. The battle was not about brute force. It was about intelligence, observation, and cooperation. Humans communicated constantly, sharing updates, warning of dangers, and adjusting plans. Pilots flew with precision, using rapid maneuvers to avoid attacks and create opportunities for counterstrikes. Engineers worked quickly to repair damaged ships. Everyone understood that success depended on trust and teamwork. After several tense hours, the aliens realized that the humans were not an easy target. They had underestimated the intelligence and creativity of a small, determined species. Unable to break through the defenses or capture key positions, the alien fleet began to retreat. Humans did not chase them. The officer knew that overextending could be dangerous. The settlement was their priority. The aliens retreated, leaving humans with their first victory in defense of their new home. The sense of triumph spread quickly. People celebrated quietly, not with loud festivities, but with a shared relief. They had survived their first real confrontation and had done so with skill, strategy, and courage. Families hugged, engineers smiled, and children laughed for the first time in weeks, no longer afraid of what might come from the sky. The officer reminded everyone to stay vigilant. This was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and challenges would come again. In the following weeks, humans repaired damages and strengthened their defenses. They studied the alien technology they had recovered, learning how to improve their own ships and weapons. Scientists and engineers worked together to develop better communication systems, faster energy production, and improved shields. Even the smallest successes boosted morale. Every improvement made humans more confident that they could survive future threats. Humans also learned from their first confrontation. They realized that knowledge and adaptability could overcome larger forces. They practiced strategies, trained new pilots, and ran simulations of different attack scenarios. Children observed and sometimes participated in simulations, learning how humans work together to solve problems. Everyone understood that preparation was as important as courage. As time passed, humans noticed something remarkable. Other species began to take note of their settlement. Traders and explorers from nearby systems sent quiet messages, curious about the humans who had survived exile and defended themselves against a larger fleet. Some small communities offered cooperation or trade. Humans had started to build a reputation, not through aggression, but through resilience, skill, and the ability to protect themselves and their people. The officer saw that humans were changing. They were no longer just survivors. They were learners, explorers, and protectors. They had discovered the power of cooperation, intelligence, and courage in the face of danger. The first confrontation had taught them that numbers alone did not guarantee victory. Adaptation, planning, and human ingenuity were just as important. Even as humans rebuilt and strengthened their settlement, the officer planned for the future. He knew that other hostile forces could appear. He encouraged training, scouting, and exploration beyond the planet. Humans began sending small expeditions to nearby systems, using the alien ships they had repaired. They mapped asteroids, discovered new resources, and learned about star routes that could help them expand safely. The first confrontation had given them not only confidence, but also valuable experience in dealing with the unknown. Humans also became closer as a community. Families, workers, and scientists learned to rely on each other in ways they had never imagined. Children respected the hard work of adults, and adults appreciated the courage and curiosity of children. The officer often reminded everyone that unity was their greatest strength. Without trust, cooperation, and shared responsibility, even the most advanced technology could not save them. Months after the first encounter, the settlement was stronger than ever. The aliens had retreated, but humans remained cautious. Scouts were constantly active, monitoring the skies for any sign of danger. Engineers improved ships, defenses, and energy systems. Scientists continued exploring ruins and technology, seeking every advantage. Life on the planet was still full of work and challenge. But humans had learned that challenges could be overcome with effort, intelligence, and courage. The officer often walked through the settlement at night, looking at the lights, listening to the quiet hum of energy machines, and watching the children play. He thought about how far humans had come. They had been banished, sent into the unknown, yet they had survived storms, hardships, and their first confrontation with a hostile fleet. They had done it together, relying on skill, intelligence, and a willingness to protect each other. Humans had learned something powerful. No matter how strong the threat, careful planning, observation, and teamwork could turn the tide. They had faced fear and emerged stronger. They had turned exile into opportunity, danger into learning, and uncertainty into a sense of purpose. Even as the officer reflected, humans looked toward the stars. They knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, full of unknown civilizations, opportunities, and challenges. But the first confrontation had proven that they could survive. They had the courage, skill, and unity to face what came next. The aliens had underestimated humanity, and in doing so, they had shown humans just how capable they could be. From that point forward, humans trained harder, explored farther, and planned carefully. The settlement was not only a home, but a symbol of resilience. Every person contributed to the growing strength of the community. They learned that intelligence, courage, and unity could make even a small group a formidable force. The officer knew that the day would come when humans would face even greater challenges. But he also knew that they were ready. They had survived exile, tamed a new world, discovered advanced technology, and defended themselves against a powerful enemy. Humanity had G. After surviving their first confrontation, humans on the new planet realized that they were capable of more than just survival. The officer encouraged everyone to think not only about defending themselves, but also about building a future that could last for generations. Life had become organized, technology was integrated into daily work, and humans had learned to adapt to the planet's environment. But the officer knew that staying confined to one world would limit their potential. They needed to explore, communicate, and eventually expand. Humans began planning carefully. Scouts and small exploration ships were prepared to leave the planet in short missions to nearby systems. The officer emphasized caution. Each mission would gather information, identify possible resources, and meet with civilizations that might be open to cooperation. Humanity had no intention of conquering. They wanted to survive, grow, and establish themselves peacefully. This approach reflected their values, but it also required careful planning, diplomacy, and intelligence. The first contact missions were tense. Humans approached uncharted systems, scanning planets and sending signals to detect any life. Sometimes the scanners detected nothing. Other times they detected traces of small settlements or alien travelers. Humans moved slowly, making sure to signal peace rather than aggression. Messages were carefully sent using universal codes, showing curiosity and a willingness to communicate. Many civilizations ignored these signals, but a few responded with interest that the officer guided the diplomats and explorers personally. He emphasized honesty, respect, and fairness in every interaction. Humans had learned that trust was more valuable than weapons. Even small exchanges of knowledge or trade could create bonds that might protect them in the future. The first successful contact was with a species that lived in floating cities on a gas giant. They had never met humans before, but were intrigued by their curiosity. Cooperation and willingness to share information. Trade agreements were established slowly. Humans offered technology derived from the ancient ruins, helping these civilizations improve energy systems and water purification. In return, humans received resources unavailable on their own planet. This exchange built mutual trust and demonstrated that humans were fair partners. Word spread quietly through the galaxy that humans were different. They were not conquerors, but problem solvers, innovators, and allies worth knowing. Back on the home planet, humans expanded their settlement. Engineers designed new buildings, combining human knowledge with lessons learned from alien technology. Farms grew larger, energy systems became more efficient, and workshops produced tools for further expansion. Children learned from adults, observing construction, farming, and engineering, while also practicing problem-solving exercises to prepare for future exploration. Every member of the community had a role. The officer often reminded them that their strength came not from one person, but from unity. Diplomatic skills became as important as technical skills. Humans had to learn the cultures, values, and needs of each species they met. They held meetings, shared knowledge, and mediated disputes when necessary. Even small acts of kindness, like sharing food or medicine, made a significant impact. Other civilizations began to see humans as reliable, thoughtful, and intelligent partners. This reputation made alliances possible and allowed humans to gain access to trade routes, resources, and information that would otherwise have been impossible to reach. As humans continued to explore, they discovered more abandoned structures, like the ones they had found on their home planet. Some contained technology, while others offered knowledge about the galaxy, its resources, and civilizations that had risen and fallen long before humans existed. Scientists and engineers studied every artifact carefully. They were not just learning how to use machines. They were learning lessons about planning, strategy, and sustainability. Human ships became more advanced. By combining alien technology with human engineering, they developed vessels capable of faster travel, better defense, and greater efficiency. Pilots trained rigorously, learning to handle emergencies and navigate difficult terrains. Children watched and learned from simulations, building skills that would be useful when they grew older. The community understood that knowledge was cumulative. Each generation could build on the successes of the previous one. Expansion brought new challenges. Some unclaimed planets were difficult to settle. Harsh climates, dangerous wildlife, or unstable terrain made construction slow and careful. Humans approached these challenges with patience, using their knowledge and technology to adapt. Teams were organized to specialize in environmental studies, building techniques, and sustainable farming. They learned that rushing often caused more problems than it solved. Gradual, careful growth became the foundation of their emerging empire. the officer emphasized leadership by example. He often visited construction sites, labs, and farms, helping wherever he could. His presence inspired humans to work together, support each other, and respect every contribution. People began to feel proud of their accomplishments. They had survived exile, defended themselves against threats, and were now building a civilization that others respected. Pride in their work strengthened morale and encouraged innovation. Diplomacy became more complex as humans encountered larger civilizations. Some were cautious, suspicious, or outright hostile. Humans learned to negotiate, offering mutually beneficial arrangements while avoiding conflict. Sometimes, the officer sent envoys with clear instructions to prioritize safety, communication, and problem-solving over aggression. These missions taught humans patience and strategy. They learned that influence could be built not by force, but by cooperation and consistent action. The human settlements also began to specialize. Some planets became centers for research, where scientists studied alien technology, environmental adaptation, and energy systems. Other planets focused on agriculture, producing enough food to supply distant settlements. Some became industrial hubs, where engineers built ships, machines, and tools for expansion. Each settlement had a purpose, and every human knew how their work contributed to the larger community. Even the arts and culture thrived. Humans created stories, music, and celebrations that honored their journey from exile to empire. They recorded lessons learned, stories of courage, and experiences from first contact with other civilizations. Children grew up surrounded by these stories, learning that resilience, intelligence, and compassion were as important as technical skill. The officer encouraged creativity, knowing that culture would strengthen identity and unity across generations. Years passed, and humans began to establish permanent stations on other planets. Trade networks grew, alliances multiplied, and settlements flourished. Humans became respected not because they dominated, but because they demonstrated intelligence, fairness, and the ability to solve complex problems. The reputation of humanity began to spread across regions of the galaxy. Small communities sought trade, information, and cooperation, recognizing humans as reliable partners. Throughout this expansion, the officer continued to lead with humility. He reminded humans that growth brought responsibility. They could use their strength to protect others, share knowledge, and solve problems, but they could not become arrogant or careless. Humanity's true power lay in unity, intelligence, and adaptability, not weapons or numbers. He encouraged exploration, learning, and innovation, knowing that the future depended on continuous improvement. The officer also emphasized preparation. Humans trained constantly in navigation, strategy, and defense. Scouts mapped star routes, technicians maintained ships, and scientists developed new energy and communication systems. Every human, regardless of age or role, contributed to the growing capability of the civilization. They had learned that survival required effort, but building an empire required vision, cooperation, and foresight taught by now. Humans had become a recognized presence in unclaimed regions of the galaxy. Their settlements were well organized, technologically advanced, and self-sufficient. Other civilizations approached them with respect, curious about their resilience and ability to thrive after exile. Humans offered assistance, trade, and knowledge, earning trust and establishing alliances that would strengthen their position for the future. The officer often looked out over the settlements, reflecting on the journey. From banishment to building a thriving civilization, humans had overcome fear, uncertainty, and danger. They had turned exile into opportunity, challenges into lessons, and knowledge into power. They were no longer just survivors. They were builders, explorers, and leaders in a galaxy that had once dismissed them. Humans had learned a vital truth. Strength was not measured by numbers alone, but by courage, intelligence, and the willingness to work together. Every new settlement, every successful alliance, and every technological breakthrough demonstrated this truth. Exile had forced them to grow, and they had risen to the challenge. Even as humans planned further expansion, they remained humble. They respected the planets they settled on, the civilizations they interacted with, and the knowledge they discovered. Every action was guided by thought, cooperation, and responsibility. This philosophy became the foundation of the emerging human empire, one that promised to last not through fear, but through intelligence.